Well, good evening, folks, and welcome to the UFU and CAFRE Lamb Efficiency webinar. We have a range of speakers tonight, and we will focus on technical efficiency measures on farm to improve farm sustainability. Currently, the agriculture industry faces many challenges, from APR, TB, and ammonia, etc. However, tonight's webinar is about focusing on the positive outlook in the sheep industry. Following our speakers, there will be a Q&A, and if anybody would like to ask a question, please put it through on the Q&A box, not the chat box. iPads and phones may have this button at the top of the screen. This evening's webinar will be recorded, and a link will be sent out after the event to watch again if you wish to do so. There will be a survey at the end, and please complete after the webinar is over so that we can keep improving our webinars. Our first speaker tonight here is Jacqueline Leedicoat, Head of Market Intelligence and Data Management with the LMC. Jacqueline will give us an outlook for lamb markets in 2025 and the current issues that are impacting supply and demand. So it's over to you, Jacqueline.
Good evening. Hello. It is great to be with you this evening on behalf of LMC. By way of an introduction, according to the DAERA Farm Census in June 2023, there were over 2 million sheep in Northern Ireland, one for every person. Of these, over 820,000 were ewes, which lambed in spring 2023, with 151,000 ewe lambs on farm coming forward as replacements. The Northern Ireland sheep sector output. Lamb and hogget throughput in local plants totalled almost 500,000 head during 2023 to 2024, which was a small decrease of less than 1% on the previous year. The average carcass weight of lambs and hoggets processed locally during 2023 to 24 was 21.1 kilograms, a 0.7 kilo decline year on year, and a consequence of a poorer finish stemming from challenging production conditions of wet weather and depressed grass growth. Looking at direct slaughter lamb exports to the Republic of Ireland. This remains a key market for local lambs, despite recording a 10.7% decline year on year in 2024. This stemmed from tight supplies locally, leading to fewer lambs exported, and with demand from other markets securing exports from Northern Ireland. Looking to GB, the annual exports of Northern Ireland breeding and store sheep have increased each year, as shown in the chart. The estimated data for the year to December 2024 shows a 47% increase to 150,000 head. The GB market has been a strong pulling force for Northern Ireland lambs during 2024. Tight supplies have shaped the trade for lamb across the UK and Ireland, with GB factory agents increasing competition for lambs in local marts during the summer months. As a point of interest, weekly direct slaughter lamb exports to GB reached a 10-year high during the month of June, when 2,318 lambs were exported. GB continues to be a key market for Northern Ireland mutton, with strong numbers of cull sheep leaving Northern Ireland for markets in GB. Conversely, Northern Ireland breeding and store sheep exports to the Republic of Ireland farms for further production decreased in 2024 compared to 2023, from 88,000 to an estimated 51,000 head. This was a consequence of the draw of high prices seen across all regions of GB and Northern Ireland. The Northern Ireland deadweight trade. Finished lamb deadweight price overall in pence per kilo has remained above 2023 for all but 1 week this year. Figures from DERA for week ending the 9th of November show a price of 609.36 pence per kilo, which is a 1% increase on the previous week and a 23.5% increase on the same time last year. The average price for R3 grade lambs has maintained a strong performance, with 2024 being a record year for prices and a current annual average of 677.7 pence per kilo over the year. Data for the week ending 30th of November shows an average price for R3 lambs sitting at 651.3 pence per kilo. Hogget throughput locally has declined from 2023 levels. Tight supplies in 2024 led to record high prices in the lead up to Easter and Muslim festivals. Across the regions, a common theme of a difficult lambing period, followed by challenging weather and poor grass growth, meant lambs were slow to finish, with the quality of finish behind previous years. This saw local plants increase the payable weight to 22 kilos during the summer to encourage producers to present well-fleshed lambs for slaughter. 2024 has therefore been a year of continued strength for the lamb trade, with the 3 major lamb processing plants providing increased base quotes for the week beginning 9th of December of 660 to 670 pence per kilo for R3 grade lambs, and also paying up to 23 kilos, having paid up to 22 kilos during the majority of the year. This gives us some indication of the competition for supplies. Republic of Ireland plants have reportedly recently increased their payable weight to 23.5 kilos. The outlook for the live and deadweight lamb trade locally is a promising one, with expectation there will be fewer hoggets available in both Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland post-Christmas. The continued strong prices experienced by producers are also the result of tight supply in the UK, Europe and globally. AHDB are predicting overall retail demand for lamb will outstrip 2023 levels by 20%. EU commodity prices. According to the FAO, meat prices in Europe were down 0.8% from their October level, but up 5.9% year on year. The decline was mainly due to lower international pig meat prices, which fell for the 5th consecutive month, reflecting abundant supplies and persistently subdued global and domestic demand. Meat prices in the EU are forecast to see modest increases of around 2% in 2025, with easing of inflation but low supply resulting in prices stabilising at a high level. Looking specifically at sheep, we see a negative supply outlook, but with resilient demand. Production across Europe is down again by almost 4%, accounted for as a result of smaller flocks and lower slaughterings, alongside disease pressures of BTV and PPR causing mortalities and reduced fertility. Price spikes are also evident at key demand events, such as Easter and Ramadan, indicating that supply is weaker than demand. Looking further ahead, the volume of EU imports is expected to grow as production eases in most member states. New Zealand, a key exporter to the EU, has experienced sluggish demand on Asian markets, leading to an anticipated increase in imports to Europe this year. However, tighter supplies in New Zealand and the recovery of demand from Asia may see volumes into Europe in 2025 remain largely stable. Australia, should a trade deal with Europe be revived, will likely contribute to imports given the impact of possible restrictions on exports to the Middle East. UK exports to Europe during this year are expected to fall around 6% as a result of lower supply and high prices. Looking to next year, imports from the UK will likely remain similar for 2025, reflecting the tightening supply situation in the UK. Although EU production of sheep meat is anticipated to decline slightly in 2024, some moderation in prices is expected for 2025, and imports will take a larger share of supply. Northern Ireland consumer trends. The estimated total value of red meat sales in Northern Ireland for the year to June 2024 was £152 million. Of this, lamb sales accounted for £15 million. Sales of all other meats, which include pork and poultry meats, in the year to June 2024 were estimated to be around £207 million. According to the Consumer Price Index produced by the Office of National Statistics, the increase in the cost of food and non-alcoholic beverages had risen by 1.8% in the 12 months to September 2024 and 1.9% in the year to October. The annual rate of 1.9% is down from a recent high of 19.2% in March 2023, which was the highest annual rate seen for over 45 years. To see the trend in consumption, therefore, we need to also look at the volume of meat sold. The estimated volume of red meat sales in Northern Ireland, shown here, is based on LMC data. Purchases to June 2024 show that the volume of red meat sales was estimated at 15.3 million kilograms. Of this, beef accounted for almost 14 million kilograms and lamb for the remainder, 1.4 million kilograms. Purchases of all other meats, which include pork and poultry meats, in the same period were estimated to be around 34 million kilograms. In 2024, our data tells us that lamb made up around 9% of the total volume of red meat purchased that year, and it has held a broadly similar position for the last 3 years, sitting at around 3% of total meat purchased, with beef at 28% and all other meat making up 69%. This shows that although the volume of lamb purchased has decreased, it has retained its position in consumer demand. To wrap up the market insights, we see a strong market with tight supplies likely to remain into 2025, providing opportunities for producers to benefit from increasing efficiencies. Northern Ireland lamb is an important export both within GB and Ireland and also to markets across Europe, including France, Holland, and Germany. Although consumption is in decline in Europe, there is a resilient core demand for sheep meat, which, combined with pressures in the supply chain, will lead to high retail prices remaining. Finally, I would like to take this opportunity to say that the Market Intelligence team are reviewing our information and outputs, and we intend to issue a survey to you, our stakeholders, in early 2025. Please do complete the survey when it is available. We want to have your feedback should you wish to view any of the data LMC provides. Please scan the QR code here, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. Thank you, Jacqueline, for that. That's a good, positive outlook you've given us there on the future of sheep meat. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Michael Calvert, a Senior Agricultural Technologist at CAFRE. Michael will focus on efficiency measures from benchmarking He will focus on the key production trends that have been the biggest impact on profitability and sustainability and how they can be interlinked. So over to you, Michael.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. As Glenn has said there, I'm going to cover just a little bit about what sustainability is, and then take a look at some of the benchmarking that has been done at CAFRE in recent years, both the financial benchmarking and the carbon benchmarking, and some of the information that has come out of that. Then I'll have a look at what the good performers do, and there's plenty of overlap between the two, as you'll see when we go through, and then we'll wrap up with a few conclusions. So I suppose, first of all, what is sustainability? Sustainability can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but fundamentally, I see it as a three-legged stool, and there's three parts of it. We've got the financial sustainability, which allows us to do all the farming and so on that we do. And we also have the environmental side, which is essential for us to be able to farm and provide us with the conditions to farm. And then there's the social side of it as well. And that's a very important part, especially in rural communities. So what I'm going to focus on tonight really is that financial and environmental part. But it's really just that those are two essential things, and none of these things work without the others sort of being right. So it's a combination of measures. And probably when we look at what we're trying to achieve going forward, it's more about optimizing our systems than maximizing our systems. And probably you'll hear from that more about that later on from the other speakers too. So just to focus on the financial benchmarking to start with, we categorize the sheep farms in two categories in the CAFRE system. We've got the upland lowland sheep category, and then we've got the hill sheep category. So just to save time tonight, I'm just going to focus on the one that we have the most data in, which is the upland lowland sheep. And we're going to look at these figures to gross margin level. And the reason for that is when we look at the gross margin, that's really where all the technical efficiency comes from. There'll be other things within the net margin that could come down to the luck of when we have invested in some buildings or some machinery and so on, and depreciation costs and things like that. And while those are very important, sometimes they can mask the technical performance side. So we'll focus on the gross margin tonight. I'll take a look at the YO productivity, and we've got quite a lot of good figures on that give us a good insight. I'll take a look at some feed costs. I'll also chat a bit about replacement policies and some of the costs and some of the differences that we would see. And then we'll try and round it off with what the good performers do at the end. So if we just take a look at the gross margin figures and the range of the gross margin figures to start with, you can see I've called this the opportunity, and I suppose it's the opportunity for a farm that's in the average to look at what's achievable in the top 25%, or a farm that's in the bottom 25% to see what steps could be made to get to the average or the top 25%. We do have quite a big range here. The top 25% farms have a gross margin that's 1.5 times the gross margin of the average. That's in pounds per euro. And in the top 25% have almost 3 times the gross margin of the bottom 25%. So what we want to look at is what's achievable, what's doable, and that's where the top 25% cohort comes in, where we can see what the good performers are actually achieving, and it sets out a milestone for us to look to ourselves. So when we take a look into the YO productivity, I suppose our average YO numbers, while there is some differences between them, really the infrastructure, machinery, labour and so on that you would need for 180 sheep compared to 170 sheep, I think we can count that these farms are actually all quite similar, or these cohorts are all quite similar, and therefore we can do some good comparisons between them. And I suppose one of the things we look at in the YOs is replacement costs, keeping that flock of ewes stable, and what it costs to achieve that. And if we see the bottom 25% have 175% of the replacement costs of the top 25%. And there's lots of things that will come into that, and we'll look at some of those as we go along. But essentially, it's costing the farms in the bottom quite a lot to maintain the size of their flocks, and that could be due to health policies. It could be due with the actual replacement policies and where that all fits together in terms of breeding and buying in and things like that. But that's where we have seen a huge difference in the costs. Another big difference that we look at is in the bottom 25% have 35% less fewer lambs sold per ewe. And again, when we look at health and so on, there are big opportunities there for the farms in the bottom 25% to make advances. And then if we also take that then to carcass weight produced per ewe, again, we've got the bottom 25% are producing nearly 40% less per ewe. So when we look at those factors, you can see that the management and the handling of the ewe has a huge impact on the financial performance of the business. Another factor that we can see from the financial benchmarking is the breakdown of the lamb sales. So we look at the top 25% in this graph on the left. You can see that there's 72% of the lambs are sold fat in those in that cohort. 14.5% are sold as stores, and 13.2% are retained as replacements. If we look at the bottom 25%, you can see that 57% are sold fat, 24.5% are sold as stores, and 18.3% are retained as replacements. And we did a little bit of work. We had to put in a few assumptions and so on, but we kept it consistent across the two cohorts as to roughly when those fat lambs would be sold, roughly when the store lambs would be sold, and roughly how long the replacements would be on the farm. And if we look at this graph on the right, we can see on the left side is the top 25%, and this is really just a profile of the lambs that are on the farm in each month from June through to December. And you can see there's quite a big difference when we look at the breakdown, but we see what it means practically. Whenever we move to the bottom 25% and what we would assume that sales profile looks like, we can see that there's a big burden coming on grassland. There's a lot of stock still on the farm in that September, October, November into December. And they're eating grass and they're consuming resources at a time when the grass growth naturally is disappearing. So that can have quite a big impact on the efficiency of the entire sheep flock, because the pressure that puts on the grass resource. So we found that quite interesting to see. We just used the average figures for each of the cohorts and tried to model it a little bit. So maybe continuing on from the previous slide and the pressure on grass production, if we have a look at some of the feed use and the feed costs. So if we look at the concentrate cost per ewe, there's not really a huge trend there, but what that really ignores is the production of the ewe. So we'll go on to some of that, but I suppose it's important. In the beef one, we looked at the concentrate cost per ton last week, and we found that there was quite a difference between what the bottom 25% were paying per ton for their feed. But actually, when we look at the sheep, it's there's not a huge difference in it. It still probably pays to shop around and do that, but it was an interesting statistic from the last time, which doesn't seem to follow through in the sheep side. But if we look at the concentrate fed per dead weight, per kilo of dead weight. And what we count in this dead weight category is all the sales. So it could be a lamb that's sold as a store, it could be a lamb that's sold fat. And in the benchmarking in the background, it basically takes the live weights and converts it so that we've got a dead weight equivalent across the board. So if we look at the concentrate fed per kilo of dead weight, the bottom 25% are feeding 53% more per kilo than the top 25%. And if we even break that down on a per lamb basis, so maybe in your mind, you know what your finished lamb is worth, there's a 55% increase in the concentrate costs for the bottom 25%. And the total amount of concentrate fed follows a similar pattern, where the bottom 25% have 46% more concentrates fed. Now, if we cast back to the previous slide, where we showed the pressure that's coming on in that that sort of autumn, late summer, autumn into the winter, the top 25% will have a lot more grass available for lambs maybe that need to stay on for that wee bit longer, and also for ewes. And you can see maybe some of that pressure that's causing this increased feeding could be coming from that that end of the process. So we'll take a wee look here at the replacement policy then as well. And you'll hear an awful lot more about this from Mark. So I'm not going to go on too much about it, because his story is far more interesting than mine. But this is just an example of 20% replacement flock and a 25% replacement rate on a 200 ewe flock. It's just a very simple illustration of how replacement policy can impact on the farm. If we count a policy where we hold the ewe lambs over and breed them as hoggets, the number of animals we need on the farm to sustain that, and I'm not assuming any mortality here, so in reality, you'd probably be looking maybe at an extra 10% in each of these categories. And I know at this stage in the ewes, you would have ewes going off as cull ewes or mortality, and therefore that number would be starting to drop a little bit. But if we just look at the theoretical animal platform that's required to sustain that flock, when we're breeding our hoggets, you can see in this column we've basically got our 40 ewe lambs that we're retaining. We then have another cohort of hoggets, and probably when they get to a certain size, quite early in that year that they're carrying over, they'll be consuming a similar amount of resource as a ewe. And then we have our ewes as well. And therefore, if we breed our ewe lambs, we can basically remove that cohort 40 out of the system. And that probably takes a bit of pressure off the land, and particularly maybe at the tail end of the year, at breeding time and so on, there's less pressure on the farm and potentially better results from the ewes that are there. And that's a very simple illustration. There's been quite a lot of work done by Chagas, and some reports that I was looking through them a couple of weeks ago when I was getting organised for this. And a standard conclusion that came out, I think there was 4 or 5 different reports, and one conclusion that appeared in all of them, it was around the breeding of ewe lambs, was that lambing ewes to produce their first litter at 1 year of age has no effect on performance when lambing at 2 years of age. And hopefully we'll hear more from Mark about that, and some of the targets that he would see as crucial in order to be able to achieve this. But essentially, it's getting the lambs to the right weight at the point of breeding. So it's not just a case of just doing it by the calendar, but there's a lot of management has to go in order to achieve that. But you can see if you can drop this cohort out of the flock requirements, that it actually takes a lot of pressure off the system. So I'm just going to talk a wee bit about the carbon benchmarking project that we did at CAFRE over 3 years, finished in March this year. In that project overall, we had over 1,400 farms benchmarked We had some benchmarked more than once. So in our unique farm cohort, we've been about 1,000. Within that 1,400 farms, we had over 2,000 enterprises. It was all very well received, and we had a great participation and a lot of interest in it. This is just a breakdown of the enterprise types we had. So we had quite a lot of beef. We had over 500 sheep farms participated, at some dairy, and then a few others scattered in between as well. And I suppose if we just look at the sheep emissions, if we look at these per kilo of dead weight, which is really what our calculator gave us out in these group reports that we were able to analyse, we had 457 farms in this cohort. And this is really just a breakdown of the emission sources. But you could, there's probably quite a lot on that graph, but the main thing just to look at is the difference between the bottom and the top 25%. And the average. And if we take a look through, again, I like to look at these things as opportunities, and we can see that the bottom 25% have 1.5 times the emissions of the average, and 2.3 times the emissions of the top 25%. So again, that's really just to show what's doable. And what can be done. And I suppose if we're looking at trying to do things and make those improvements, we can try and learn from what the top 25% farmers are doing, and try and move. If we could move everybody towards that, even towards the average, heading towards the top 25%. But there's a significant opportunity there to reduce the emissions. And I suppose the reason why I've put these two together is it shows a very similar relationship between emissions and gross margin. And if we go back, if we think about the main sources of emissions are around enteric fermentation, which is really around your livestock numbers and how they're utilised, so the productive stock. Manure, fertilizer, and purchase feed. I suppose manure management's a function just of the numbers. There's maybe not so much that we can do about that in the sheep side. But if we think of these items, these are all the things that impact on the gross margin. So so if we look at our purchase feed, our fertilizer, and the productivity of our breeding stock, the time on farm of our growing and finishing stock, those are the areas where we'll make inroads in both gross margin and emissions. So just to summarize what the financial and carbon, what the good performers do, because there's totally an overlap between the both. There's no question that those farms that utilise resources better have lower emissions. And I suppose if we take a wee look at the lamb side of the coin, we're looking at lamb performance, health, mortality, nutrition, and that drafting pattern. So really having the lambs on the ground, performing from day one, as many as possible from the ewes, performing from day one, getting good daily live weight gain, hitting the market spec to get the best price, and getting off the farm quickly, so that we've got room then when we come round to the breeding cycle of the ewe and so on. And if we look at the ewe, we're looking at replacement policy. So when we looked at that example of those, let's say the 20% replacement rate, and we had those extra 40 hoggets, if those extra 40 hoggets aren't producing anything for a whole year, but they're still consuming the resources, then there's obviously a cost to that financially, but there's also then a carbon impact on that too, because it's consuming resources with no output attached to it. So breeding ewe lambs, the fertility, the numbers of sheep that go to the ram, and how that translates through to scanning and birth and weaning and then finishing, all those things have to be taken into account. And when we look at our top 25% farmers, and you'll see when Mark gives his presentation and when Eileen gives hers, that these are all the things that they are considering and that they value as important. If we look at purchase feed, we're making better quality forage, looking after the grass, trying to get as much out of that as possible, targeting the feed to the best outcome, the type of feed and the rate of feed. And if we look at on this red side, we've got the fertilizer, so incorporation of clover, grassland management, nutrient management planning, and it's all around just the efficient use of the resources that we have and the resources that we buy in. Fundamental to that, and really a critical part of the benchmarking, and again we'll hear more about that, it's monitoring and planning, utilizing your benchmarking. So don't do the benchmarking and then put it in the drawer and forget about it. Actually look at what it's trying to show and try and make decisions to improve that. Keep an eye on your prices, budget, and measure. So just to wrap up, apologies I've gone over time a bit, but I think both of these benchmarking projects both show us that there are lots of opportunities to improve, and those improvements come on both that environmental and the financial side. The carbon footprint is very useful, and it can maybe highlight some of those areas that aren't performing just as well, and maybe from an angle that you mightn't necessarily see maybe there's limited data collected in the financial benchmark to make that straightforward, but there's definitely lots of win-wins. And I suppose my message would be to encourage people to measure and manage, and that the data that you have on your farm is your friend, it's not an enemy, and make use of it, because looking at your data and making decisions on data will ultimately make your decisions more sound and make you more profitable, and make you more environmentally sustainable as well. So thank you very much for your attention. And if there's any questions, we can look at them at the end.
Thank you, Michael, for that all there. That's some very useful information there, and it's something that we as farmers, we don't look into our own figures as much as we should, and I think that there's a lesson for us all there. So thank you again there, Michael. Our next speaker is Eileen McCluskey, Senior Livestock Technologist at CAFRE. Eileen will look at the key actions that have been taken to improve efficiency within the sheep flock. She will also present the CAFRE farmers' performance figures. So over to you, Eileen.
Thank you very much, Glenn, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to everybody tonight. So as Glenn highlighted, I'm just going to take you through some of the key measures that we do to improve efficiency within our sheep flocks at CAFRE and highlight some of the performance. So I suppose maybe just have we think about this, and we think a lot about efficiency and what is efficiency, and ultimately, folks, we think of it very, very simplistically. It's what goes in versus what comes out. And in a livestock system, that's our livestock and our resources, and our outputs in this particular scenario will be our lamb. But it's also really important to highlight the technical efficiency, so how well you do within your systems will drive your financial efficiency. And what we also know as well that is a real big driver in relation to environmental sustainability. And there's lots of things we have to take into consideration, not just obviously we have to ensure these systems are technically efficient and financially efficient, but we want to ensure that we are meeting sort of other factors in relation to improving biodiversity and improving habitat and looking at water quality and all these other factors that we take into consideration when we're managing land. So whenever we think about just our systems at CAFRE and what our focus of our systems at CAFRE, firstly and foremost, ultimately, we want to demonstrate efficient, sustainable sheep systems, okay? Those ones that are financially viable and help meet lots of our other targets. We want to integrate, the whole aspect of nature and enhance biodiversity and try and integrate that into our systems. And if we're able to do this and have efficient systems, we can minimize the impact that our livestock systems will have on the environment, and that's really important. This will then obviously help us in relation to our carbon capture and storage, but ultimately, folks, one of our big roles is that we have to educate and demonstrate and look at new technologies or existing technologies or systems that we can put in place to try and improve our efficiency. So we think a wee bit just about what our sheep systems at CAFRE are. Some of you will be very well familiar, and this evening I'm just going to discuss our sheep systems at our Beef and Sheep Centre. But our Beef and Sheep Centre, we're running a flock of 210 Clyn cross females. Those females are bred at our hill farm, and they are selected for high maternal genetics. And that's really, really important, okay? What we're trying to do here is to create a ewe that is suitable for this environment and suitable for this habitat and suitable to meet all the targets that we want her to achieve. She's mated with a terminal sire, because all the progeny here is sold for slaughter. So the aim here is to, have that maternal ewe that will produce lambs, produce high volumes of milk, good growth rates, and obviously then meet that with a terminal sire that will help again with those growth rates and those carcass traits. High stocking rates, okay, we run quite a high stocking rate, and I'll talk a wee bit more about that later in detail in relation to a paddock type system. And high health status is one of the biggest challenges on most, especially intensively stocked sheep farms, that we have to really, try and, get a good grasp with. We integrate reasonable level, we integrate, a range of different technologies into our livestock systems, into our sheep systems in relation to data collection and monitoring our health systems, and that's fundamentally important. So I suppose when I think of the drivers that we're trying to demonstrate in our sheep systems is selecting that animal for superior genetic potential. Improve utilization of resources, okay? Remember, we think of that really fundamentally, what goes in versus what comes out. And in this situation, what we're trying to do is improve utilization of grass. Our sheep system is a grass-based system, and we are trying to finish all our progeny off grass. Improve health and welfare, as I said, that is, one of the 3 legs of the stool, and all our progeny here are finished. And one of the big drivers that we really focus on here is our growth rates and our days to slaughter, because we know that is one of the biggest factors that will drive technical efficiency within our systems, but also help improve those environmental targets. So we'll look at each one of these in a wee bit more detail. So improving genetic potential, easier said than done, but actually there's lots that we can do on our system to improve the genetic potential of our ewes. I've said here, breed efficient, sustainable ewes. And what do we want to do? We want to breed those ewes that are fit for purpose. This is a high prolific system. What I want to do is try and, have, produce, in theory, 2 ewes per lamb that are at that acceptable weaning weight. So I'm looking at the maternal ability of that ewe. Is she capable to get in lamb, stay in lamb, give birth with very, very little intervention, and actually then rear that lamb? That's what I mean whenever I want to ensure my ewes have high maternal ability. Litter size is important. Litter size is important, and it needs to be taken into consideration with the type of system that you have and the resources you have. Bigger is not always better. If we think very crudely in a lowland system, we're aiming for that sort of like 2 lambs per ewe, but litter size has to be taken into consideration with the resources. 8-week weight, we monitor that really carefully, and we're always looking at that ewes, and really this is basically that weight of that lamb at sort of 6 to 8 weeks of age. That lamb will have consumed, over 50% of the milk it's ever going to consume in its lifetime by 6 or 8 weeks. And that's a really clear indication of that ewe's ability to produce milk. So that's a really, really key figure. So we're always trying to select ewes or, from lambs that have shown to have a good 8-week weight, because that shows good milk potential. And fecal egg counting. One of the biggest challenges that we have on the sheep farms, and we'll chat about this a wee bit more detail, is actually health and in particular parasites. And where possible, if we can, select animals with fecal egg counts and improved resilience for parasites. So that's what we're trying to do when we select our superior replacements. And some of the key things that we do when we look at our replacements, we basically rank all the lambs that we have available to us for selection for slaughter. We look at daily live weight gain, basically from birth to weaning. And we look at that ewe's mothering ability, and we look if there's been any issues at lambing time. And what I want to do is select a replacement lamb for you that's lambed on her own and give me no bother. We do select initially for Lowland Beef and Sheep Centre a lamb that has been born, a twin. And then we also look at daily live weight gain, and that's really important because that rules out that big lamb that was born first. That doesn't underestimate the potential of that later set of twins for growth potential. And basically then that is how we select our replacements from, those animals that meet all those basic targets. And that helps us have a good high focus on maternal ability. Obviously, the terminal sire is 50% of that, and we're looking at high genetic merit sires because all our lambs are going straight for slaughter. We are looking at lambs, with that, improved obviously growth rate. We're looking at 8-week weight, and we're looking at, sort of muscle and fat depth, so we can ensure those lambs help us meet that target. And what's really, really important, and maybe one of the difficult challenges, is actually to ensure that we have bred an animal that's fit to finish off grass, because we know how important forage is in our system. It's not free, but it is one of our cheapest forms of feed, and we really want to ensure that we have selected females and males that can grow from grass. And one of the sort of selection criteria that we have for our lambs is grass-based, grass-bred rams, to try and ensure that then that genetic potential to finish off grass is passed on to our progeny. So just maybe just look at some of the performance. If we look at some of the performance here, and I've done just sort of recent performance and a 3-year average, but across the board we sort of run anywhere sort of between that 200 to 210 ewes. Our scanning percentage current year was 183%. That's slightly lower than maybe our previous years, which is sitting at 1.9, so that's sort of 200% average. Our ewe weight, our mature ewe weight sort of sits in around that sort of 70%, and that's where we aim to try and keep that sensible mature ewe weight. Lamb wean weight doesn't differ drastically here. You can see average lamb wean weight this year was 32.5. Daily live weight gain up to weaning 274 grams per day. And another factor that another sort of key performance indicator that we factor into our system is we look at kilogram of lamb weaned per kilogram of ewe mated. And this actually, there's very little that can hide behind this figure. And, on a 3-year average, we're sort of sitting there at 0.8 kilograms of lamb weaned per kilogram of ewe. This year, it's slightly lower, and that's probably a reflection on our lower scanning percentage, which obviously means we're weaning less lambs and potentially growth weight. And I suppose I maybe should have put that in there. Average lamb wean weight or lamb weaning percentage across the board and average is in around sort of 1.7%. This year, it was slightly lower. So forage systems, folks, because it's a really, really important aspect of our sheep systems. It's a spring-based flock. Everything is, the ewes are kept outdoors till very, very, very close to lambing, where they will come in and get a small component of concentrate and silage, obviously, to take them through to lambing. But really what we're trying to do here is maximize animal performance from grass. That is the key driver and the efficiencies of one of our systems. It sounds easy. Sometimes it's easier said than done. But really what we're trying to do here is we're trying to produce grass. And then possibly the harder aspect of it is utilising it. So we run a 7-paddock system. It's a 12-hectare sort of area, and we're stocked quite highly. And it's quite a, it's a good area for grass growth. And we're trying to ensure that we're putting high quality grass in front of our animals at all stages. The animals probably go through our paddocks on a sort of basically 2.5 day rotation. But we're continuously monitoring the grass in our paddocks. We're monitoring where the animals need to go next. We're looking sort of a foresight, what grass we have available to us. Are we going to be able to work through those paddocks? And if there is certain times throughout the year when maybe grass is getting in front of us, we'll take that paddock out for bales. And that's really important because we want to utilise it. We can produce it. We also want to utilise it to the best of our ability. And how do we know this? Okay, how do we know our lambs are actually doing really, how do we know our performance is good at grass? And Michael already alluded to this, is that performance and managing performance is key. We cannot measure, we can't manage what we don't measure, and that's really important. And we need to actually monitor animal performance. So we will, and I'll chat a wee bit about this later, but obviously we will individually record our lambs at birth. We will know what the birth weight is, and then we will regularly record their performance. We want to see what the growth rate is. The growth rate of a lamb, of any animal, is a really, really good indication to how well that animal's doing. And there's going to be really two things. It's going to be either nutrition or it's going to be health. And you will probably see dips in growth rate before you will actually see any issues with health for parasites, for example, or maybe issues with nutrition. So we're continuously looking at growth rate. We're continuously looking at our daily life gains. We will have targets for our animal that we would try to achieve throughout the year. If we think up to that 6 to 8 week weight, we're always looking for that 300 gram plus. And if our lambs aren't meeting the targets, then we're in a situation to ask the question, why not? If not, why not? And then we have to say to ourselves, is it a nutritional aspect or is it a health aspect? And actually take some action there. So measuring performance is key throughout the grazing season. Okay, so maybe if we just look at a wee bit of performance in, this is lamb performance at the Beef and Sheep Centre. So just an example of just information of lambs, obviously live weight at for selection of slaughter, 40, just average here, 45.4, dead weight 21.80, so we had a kill out percentage there at 48%. Lifetime daily gain from birth to slaughter this year was 212. Our average, or probably not even a 3-year average, or probably long sort of term average is probably sitting in closer to 230 grams. So we know our daily live weight gain this year is down, and that's a combination just the year we're in, and obviously just a combination of just lower grass. We know we probably grew about 20% less grass on the farm this year than we have in other years. Grades, those lambs will always grade. 75% are our grades, the rest are probably ewes. And then we're always sitting in around that sort of 3 to 4 L fat class. So that's really the performance of the lambs from the Beef and Sheep Centre. We have a target with ourselves. We talked about days to slaughter. 80% of the lambs be gone by that sort of 180 day mark. And then the majority of the rest of the lambs, the target is for everything to be away by the end of the year. We also finish a number of lambs from our Hill Farm Centre, and I just wanted to throw up a wee bit, I just wanted to mention a wee bit of performance in relation to them. So that we normally sort of take down we finish about 250 to 300 lambs from our hill farm centre. Majority of those are probably a Blackie Texel cross. And I suppose live weighted selection for slaughter this year averages 47 kilograms, dead weight just over 20, and our killer percentage a bit lower, 43%. I just threw this in here, days on farm. So on average, we had those lambs on farm for 65 days. There was a range in there. Some of those lambs were going 20 days after they came down, up to about the highest was about 120 days. But really on average, those lambs spent about 65 days on farm. Majority of them graded at an hour and a 3-4L fat class. But those lambs do very, very well whenever they come down. So folks, then the final one maybe really just to have a wee chat about, and it's you know, probably maybe the most difficult one to get right, is our animal health and welfare. We know that animal health has a major impact on the performance of our lambs. Some of the targets that we have for ourselves, and we have a big drive to minimise the use of antibiotic and anthelmintic use within our sheep flocks. That's extremely important within all our livestock systems. Where the key areas we're focusing on is an animal health plan. We look at this annually and it's updated regularly. We have a vaccination program for our ewes, and this is really to reduce the likes of mortality and particular issues with barren rates, for example. Parasite management, there's a plan in there for parasite management, and also mineral profiling. So we will regularly, twice a year, we'll regularly mineral profile the ewes. Another components there that we're trying to integrate into the flock, and we're just to try and reduce our use of antibiotic use is like a standing operator procedure to really identify if there's a requirement for antibiotic use before it's ever used. So if we think about parasites, as I said, it's a difficult one. Parasite burdens we know will impact performance of grass. The issue, and maybe what we don't realise, is actually it has a long-lasting effect. We drench our lambs and the parasite burden is gone and we think we've solved the problem, but ultimately, unfortunately, lots of the times the damage has been done, which has a negative impact on our lambs' ability for growth and our growth potential. So it's really important that we try and reduce the negative impact parasites have on our lambs. They do reduce growth rates, you know, and unfortunately that impacts the lambs longwards. So a couple of the practices that we're using at the farm, we do follow lots of protocols in relation to scops. We regularly monitor with fecal egg counts. So we'll routinely take samples of the lambs pre-drenching and post-drenching, because while we want to see if we need to drench, we also need to ensure that the drench is working. So testing the efficacy of our drench is really, really important. And then integrating the use of selective treatment. So if we have an animal, a lamb that's growing really, really well, doing really well, there's no requirement for it to drench that lamb, and that's really important for the sustainable use, long-term impact of anthelmintic use on our farms. So if we think about animal health, then animal health fundamental to efficiency, and Michael highlighted very clearly it's also fundamental to our low sort of carbon systems. And really the drivers behind that there is poor animal health will affect our number of lambs that we have for sale. It will impact, you know, feed efficiency and utilization. It will greatly increase days to slaughter. And also, you know, this aspect of we look very carefully at the product, you know, the productive longevity of our ewes within our system. We want to keep them there for as long as possible, but we also want them to be productive. And I suppose, folks, then, you know, how do we have all this information and how do we know all this information? And Michael touched on this really, really well. We need to improve, we can improve performance with information, data collection and management. I've already said it, we cannot manage what we don't measure. We need to capture that information. There's a huge amount of information from our flocks. We need to capture the information. We need to understand what that information that we need to capture. We need to understand that information is extremely valuable. It tells us a huge amount about our flock. It tells a huge amount about the productivity of our flock and the health of our flock. And ultimately, that information has to be what drives the decisions on our farm. Okay, we need to be selecting females from our most productive ewes. We need to be selecting lambs or females from our animals that are most resistant to parasites. We need to understand this level of information from our ewes. How do we do this? Lots of different options, but there's lots of different technology out there that's suitable to help us integrate this into our systems. And ultimately, alongside this is ensuring that we have a suitable system. Because a lot of the time, actually, the collection of data is hindered by the systems that we have in place for data collection. So simple, measures can be put in place to ensure that we have efficient systems and technology for data collection. And it's this information, this valuable information, that will drive the decisions that we make on farm. So I suppose maybe just a few sort of messages to conclude. Efficient practices do drive economic and environmental viability. It's not one or the other, and that Michael showed that really, really clearly. Your most technical efficient ewes, financially efficient systems are actually the ones that are most environmentally efficient. Sustainable practices will succeed if they're financially viable, but some of the key areas that we really need to focus on is to improve the genetic potential of our flocks, improve our animal health care, and improve the data collection and help incorporate this to drive the management decisions that we make on farm. Okay, thank you very much, Glenn.
Thank you, Aileen. Thank you very much there. Lot of detail there. Something that we need to take more care of as ourselves as farmers and do that. And you have good facilities to do that. And I think it's something that we need to be. A lot of us, more of us, would need to be starting to do. Our final speaker for the evening is Mark Davison from outside Dungannon. Mark is a sheep farmer with 300 lowland ewes and has improved ewe efficiency and lamb growth rates through good grassland management, with a focus on good animal health. So over to you now, Mark.
Hello, everybody. I'm here to do the last talk for tonight. You'll be glad to know. So without any further ado, well, introduce myself here. I'm Mark Davidson, and I farm in County Tyrone, halfway between Cookstown and Dungannon. I completed an HND in agriculture at Greenmount. This was back in the 90s. Seems a long time ago now. And I was part of the Northern Ireland Sheep Programme. This was a collaboration between the Farmers Journal, Dundee, and the Department of Agriculture. It lasted about 3 years, and we did learn a lot from that, and it helped to drive my business. I was also a member of the local business development group in Dungannon. I think it was possibly over 12 years I was a member of that. So it was fantastic opportunity to get out and see around other farms and hear their stories and find out what they were making money at or what they weren't making money at. You know, every visit you'd pick up some small thing, maybe only how to hang a gate or how to do something. So my farm at home is 56 hectares. It's mainly in one block. It's the home farm, and then there's an out block which is used for silage. It's like any farm in our area, I suppose. It's a mixture of dry land, clay, peat, with a lot of flat land and with some reclaimed moss, and it would be liable to flooding. There's a river runs through the farm, so 6 or 7 times over the winter you could have 30 acres flooded, and the following day it would be away again. So it comes and goes, but you just have to make the best of what you have. Stock numbers, generally lamb about 300 ewes. This would be a mixture of 235 mature ewes and 65 ewe lambs. I keep my own replacements, breed my own replacements, and try not to buy much in. I also have 30 to 35 suck cows. Again, I work the same policy with them. Keep my own replacements. I suppose generally a Solaire-based herd, and I would keep my options open, sell as stores. Sometimes I'd try bull beef, finish as bullocks, maybe bull heifers and sell them in calf, whatever I think's best. My ewes, I suppose traditionally they're Suffolk or Texel cross ewes. Put the Charlie ram, and all my ewes with a bit of Suffolk or a bit of Texel in it. Recently, over this last 5 to 6 years, I've introduced Belclair genetics. I find that gave me a wee bit of something different. And last year, for the first, I have bought a New Zealand Suffolk, and I used him on ewe lambs, and I was very happy with him. He was only a ram lamb, but we lively lambs, and wanted to suck, wanted to live. So yeah, so far so good with them. Labour units, I farm full time. I've been full time for 12 years now, and it's a family farm. I have a good team. I have 3 children, and between us all, we get the work done. We've got a bit of benchmarking figures here. So as you can see, my gross margin has increased over this last few years. We started off average enough, maybe at £72 a ewe, and that's grew the whole way up to 156. I suppose this is a combination of good lamb prices. Lamb prices have been increasing year on year, and my productivity has increased. Gross margin per hectare is probably back around £600 a hectare, and one of the aims of the Northern Ireland Sheep Programme was to try and achieve £1,000 a hectare. So we have surpassed that, I suppose mainly with lamb prices and just more lambs to sell. Stock and rate sitting in around the 2 livestock units per hectare. I don't want to be overstocked. My land can be wet, so I like a wee bit of wiggle room. So I think 2 livestock units per hectare works for me. All right, we're on to our objectives in the farm. I suppose my main objective is to get a week's pay at the farm. I left a job and came home 12 years ago. So, you know, I had to get a week's pay at it. Like, it was no good. You have a house to keep, you have a mortgage to pay, your family, you know, you need a week's pay. My system, I thought, was just keep my own replacements, and my sheep, they're no better than anybody else's to look at. They're you bring them to the market, you get the right price for them, but keep them own. Don't buy anything in. I have enough disease, plenty of disease. I don't want any more. So I was thinking, you know, buy 2 rams, sell 400 lambs. You know, it's bound to work. Like, you're bound to get something out of it. Flock health. One thing that I do is I tag all my ewes. I think it's a pig management tag you use. It's a wee boy about 2 inches squared. Every ewe is given a letter every year. I use a letter, and then they've got a number. I think this year will be J. So once my ewe lamb's lamb, I would just tag them J1, J2, J3 up to J60 or whatever it's going to be. And they're easily identifiable. You can keep a book with you, and if she's given any trouble, you record that number. When it comes to August time, she's away. Simple as that. So you can identify good ewes. You can identify there's a ewe has 2 cracking ewe lambs. Well, take a note of that. And you can identify bad ewes. There's a ewe has rejected her lambs. She's not letting them suck. She's just no good. I breed all my own replacements from within the flock. I've been doing that for 12 years, and it seems to be working for me. Finish as many lambs as possible off grass. I lamb a sheep in 3 batches. I lamb some in February, some in March, and I suppose the bulk of them in April. I maybe go against the flow and I spread it out as much as I can. I do most of the work myself at lambing time. So if I had 6 or 7 sheep lambing a day, that's nearly enough for me. If I want to keep them living, I'm happy enough for that. My systems of nothing fancy, of mesh slots. Some of them are in straw beds, and then put them up in individual pens in the lamb. Reduce reliance on concentrate feed within the flock. I went to plenty of meetings, and everybody tells me that spring grass is as good as meal. So my policy is they get fed when they're in lamb. They get fed for a day or 2 once they have lambed, and once they go outside, they get no more meal. It seems to work for me, but you have to have grass. You can't give them anything. Losses at lambing. Well, I just try and keep a good tight eye on them. You need to be there for them. There's no point having cheap lamb and you away somewhere else. Like, you have to look about them, get them lamb, get them out, and keep them healthy. you need to keep an eye on your, I've been doing benchmarking this 12 years. And as the speakers were saying, the figures are no good unless you act on them. And it's a series of small steps. It's a series of small changes that over time will increase your margins year on year. We've got some figures here. I think KPIs, key physical performance indicators. And this is really some of my figures for ewes, mature ewes, this last 4 to 5 years. Scanning's pretty consistent. It's usually between 1.85 to, and it has ventured to 1.95 there 1 year. This is about where I want my scanning to be. I don't want, I don't want a pile of pet lambs, or at the same time, I don't want a pile of ewes running about with single lambs on them. I want the sheep to be doing the work, and I want them to be earning their keep. So I suppose lambing percentage is usually always a percentage or two more. There's always seem to have a few extra lambs. I suppose maybe it's my fault, maybe not having them empty enough at scanning, or it's usually just would be a few ewes scanned for 2 would have 3. Weaning percentage varies, anything from 1.52 to 1.81. I suppose generally around 1.7. So we'll try and keep the wee boys living. Total lamb losses from scanning to sale again varies. Some years better than other, depends on your weather, depends on a number of factors as such. But I suppose at lambing time, my personal target would be 1 lamb in 20 would be, if you lost 1 lamb in 20, you're going rightly. That's 5% at lambing. I'd always have that figure in my head. It's up and down. Sometimes you could get a fantastic run, lost no lambs, and you'd be running about with a big swelled head on you, and then the next day you'd have a couple of triplets go wrong on you. So it's up and down. Like I suppose really you want 75% twins, and I wouldn't be that keen on too many triplets, a few of them and a few singles. Barring ewes, it's pretty good. I'm happy with. Last 2 years I have had 4 ewes barren each year after scanning. So that was out of maybe 235, 240 ewes. So that leaves 1.7%. I would be pretty ruthless in culling any ewe like that didn't lamb, she'd be away. Anything during the year, if my ewe prolapsed, I would tend to cull that. If she had persistent sore feet, I would cull that. If she had rearing maybe a big lamb and a wee lamb, you'd be thinking about culling that. Having persistent singles, she'd be up for the chop too, nothing too good to herself. Store lambs, I would sell quite a few lambs as store lambs, and maybe it's going against the rule of some of the other systems, but it seems to work for me. I suppose a lot of them would be the lambs from first timers from ewe lambs. So generally it's around 30%. Some years a wee bit more, some years a bit less, but I'm sort of working around 30%. Store lamb prices are pretty good, as we know. So, if you're getting them wee boys until 80 to 100 pound, that's all right. It works out okay. No meal in them, no cost in them. That's okay. Right, flock health. What have we done for that? Well, we have scanned for OPA. Now we've done that that was part of the Northern Ireland Sheep Programme. I scanned all my mature ewes. There was 240 scanned, and we had 5 ewes that were, I suppose they didn't say as such, they were definite, but they were doubtfuls. So we culled them It's not a massive problem, but most winters you would maybe have one, maybe occasionally two ewes that would just melt away on you. You know, you'd have them at winter grazing, and they would just, you know, every time you looked at them, they're just progressively getting worse. So it's still there. It's an iceberg disease, but thankfully it's not running riot. So if I get them ewes gathered up, you know, I would sell them as soon as I notice that, because there's no coming back from that. Like, there, it's a one-way ticket. I have a good health plan with the local vet, so we've discussed several things about dosing. I vaccinate for my ewe lambs for enzootic and toxoplasmosis. Use the vaccines for that, and use the Hep B system for everything else. Food issues isn't really a big thing with me now, thankfully, so I don't use any food facts or anything like that. Regular worming, regular fluking over the winter, and have used some sampling just to check on worming and stuff. I have some issues with resistance. Ivermectin based products would kick in there in the, you know, July, August time. Can be a tricky time for me. Lamb mortality. Attention to detail with my ewe nutrition. I don't feed a big pile of meal, but I feed the best meal I can buy. I feed a 20% protein ration. It's good stuff. I feed them well, or feed them what they need. Keep an eye on their body condition. It seems to work. Antibiotic use would be pretty low too. A lot of them ewes, you know, your persistent ewe that's always a sore foot, get her away out of the road and you don't have to inject her. It makes sense. Lambing time, what I would do is, well, obviously power hose my pens out before lambing, and then after every ewe I would clean out the bedding and lime it, then put fresh straw on, bring her up, lamb her. Something that I have been working on since the lack of spectrum and stuff has been done away with, is wiping the ewes elder with an antiseptic wipe every time before, you know, before the lamb gets sucking. If you can, give it a wipe, and it's amazing how dirty that elder is, how dirty that teat is. Like, it comes up black, brown, you know. So I would do that. And being a miserable farmer, I suppose it's the best 1p you could spend. Like, you know, it's fantastic value, and it has done away with watery mouth for me. And anybody that was looking for an option, is definitely an option, cheap option. Breeding my ewe lambs. I think this provides a good opportunity to increase your output from within your flock. You see a lot of ewe lambs out there, and they're making big prices, and they might be no better than the ones you have already. You know, you could be sending good ewe lambs away to the factory, and why should you, when you know you have as good a stuff at home as you'd be buying in, and you're not buying in disease, or, you know, everybody's got disease without buying in more. My ewe lambs, I would select them during the year, so I suppose I would be selling the first of my lambs, usually now a handful at the end of May, so you'd probably be selecting from June on. Say if you had a batch of sheep, it's pretty simple. The way I work it is, I have my lambs tagged at birth. I know what mummy they relate to, and if they're running up the chute, if they're going over the weighbridge, you know, if a nice lamb, if it's a twin or triplet, only keep twin or triplets. She's ticking the box, you know, she's ready early. If you have 100 lambs in that batch, and she's one of the you know, the first 50 lambs, if she's one of the first 50 that's ready, she's above the average for that batch. She's a good lamb, you know. Mark her head, put a mark on her, and keep her. Don't be selling her, don't send her away. Like, I would generally get them clipped about August, September time, and keep them. I would then vaccinate them, and then look at, keep them in good grass, and keep them growing. They could be, some of them would be 60 kilos at tipping time. The bigger they are, the better. The more likely they are to get in lamb. Generally, I suppose I would probably be hitting about 85% of them would come in lamb. And I use New Zealand Suffolk and Charlie rams. Easy lambing, that's essential for a yo lamb. You need a wee lively lamb, somebody that wants to live, wants to come out and get them lambed and get them outside. The target is to sell 1 lamb per yo lamb that's lambed. They generally would scan anything from 1.2 till 1 year. They scanned at 1.5 something, but that was too much. So 1.2, 1.3 is nice. You don't turn it. You lambs don't turn out lamb. Oh yes, they're sold. So this is my policy with the mature ewes. Anything that's empty is sold. You've plenty coming on next year. A fat ewe is worth more than a replacement, so it's a no-brainer. Like, change them and get a wee one in. Like, your focus pre and post lambing management, I suppose. It's like a heifer calving at 2 years old. You need to look after. She's growing before she lambs. She's growing after she lambs. So generally, I would I'd like them out of the house with 1 lamb on them. If they had 2 lambs on, I would probably keep them in a small batch and meal them just to get them started and going. But you need to look after them. And again, once it comes to weaning time, you need to wean them in good time and give that yo lamb a chance to gain condition again, ready for tipping. And you just need to maintain a tight biosecurity with them and try and keep them living if possible. Improving yo efficiency. So breeding's a big thing too. There's figures there and whatnot for Eurostars. My Belclare ram that I bought 3 years ago, he is a 5-star in terminal and a 5-star in maternal. So I was looking for that. The good thing about them Belclare rams, the figures are there. Like, they're all pushing the figures. That's what we need to be looking for. EBVs. It's not some ram curly hair or big ears. All them things come off. You don't get paid for them. Like, so most of my rams that I have at the minute, I have 9 rams at the minute. I like to keep plenty of rams, I suppose. They have been bought privately. I've sort of moved away from buying these fancy boys at the mart. Just buy private. Of 2 Suffolk rams, they have both EBV figures. They were in the top 10%. My Belclare, again, he was 5-star, both. I want a good, fit, natural lamb that hasn't been overly pushed and won't melt away on me. In fact, since I started buying that type of a ram, I'm buying less rams this year. For the first year, I didn't have to buy any rams, so they last that wee bit longer. Yeah, you always again poor performance, cull them, get rid of them, and it's not. You can't carry any passengers. Your benchmarking highlights that, like, if you're keeping some LEO because she's your favorite or she's this or that, it's no good. Replacements, generally all known. I suppose what I have been doing is 1 year and 4 or 5. I have one sheep farmer that would buy a few yo lambs off. He has something a wee bit different that I don't have. He would be breeding from mules and that sort of thing. So we would be buying maybe every now and then I would buy 20 or 24 just to get something different in. But he's a real good farmer, and he's good stuff, and you're not buying in any disease. Like, I use simple paper-based recording system. There's a wee book there, a wee picture of a lambing book you used to be able to get by FB on them. They're great. You could every ewe lamb, you could make a wee note, our mothering ability, or lambing ease, or you just tick the wee box. That was fantastic. I thought like a pencil's, it's not the air pencil. It's a good, you get a good return on it. Use the data you have available and measure to manage. Make use of what you have and use it, I suppose. Grassland management. That's maybe a picture of my grass wedge, and it's probably pretty tight for grass, but the looks of it at that wedge. I suppose it's like any summer, it comes and goes. The grass, yeah, you need to monitor it, you need to grow it, and then you need to be fit to eat it, like, and not waste it. You need to budget it. Any surplus you can take out, get a few round bales, get it up. It also helps with your reseeding. You can make decisions. Can you reseed? Do you need to reseed? Can you take a paddock out? I'd be rightly set up for paddocks. I do some rotational grazing as well, but I'll try to get as many paddocks set up as I can in the summertime. My grass situation, I suppose every year when September comes, I put out whatever lambs I've left over the weighbridge, and generally anything over 36 kilos I would keep on farm and try and finish them. I would introduce maybe in September 180, 200 grams a day of a finishing ration. Anything under 36 kilos I would batch up and sell as stores. So at least from October on, I've only got one batch of lambs in the farm, and the home farm. All my ewes are winter grazing. It's not cheap country where I am, so there's plenty of grass about. You have to go looking for it, and you have to fence them. There's no fences, you just have to put up the electric fence. Reseeding, I have done some of it over this last couple of years. I probably need to do more. I need to reseed my silage ground now, as you'll probably see in the next couple of slides here. It has slipped a bit. But I've been trying to introduce a bit of white clover into my sward. I suppose we're getting a bit naturally, and maybe sow it straight in, or maybe sow it just straight grass for a year or two, and then you can spray it and then stitch the bit of clover in. Protected urea would be a product that I'd be trying to move towards now. Till again, I suppose it's cheaper. Your kilogram nitrogen's cheaper and it's more sustainable, so it would probably be the way to go in the future. Yeah, this is my silage analysis here now. So Yo nutrition. I aim to produce good silage. Usually first cuts made in the first week of June. That ground would be grazed over the winter, it would be stumped off to the soil, like, so it takes it to that usually before you get a bit of a bulk. Second cut would be made then start of August. 25 acres each time, and usually throughout the year would gather up 120 round bales of silage. The silage is made at precision chop. It works well. You can get plenty into the ewes, and it works well in your mesh. Ewes then they're fed their 500 grams a day for twins, maybe 6 weeks before the lamb. Singles, if they were in good shape, maybe 2 weeks before the lamb. You would get a wee drop. Triplets would get a bit more. I'm feeding a good ration, 20% protein. Yeah, we turf the ewes out of the grass. They don't get any meal. So that's it. That touches a wee bit in their lamb finishing there. And their silage this year, I'll touch briefly on that there. I suppose time's ticking on here. Dry matter's, yeah, the first cut's a wee bit dampish, and our energy and protein levels are both pretty low, along with our D value. So we'll probably have to feed a wee bit more meal this year than previous years. That's maybe an indication we're going to have to think about reseeding some of that silage ground, but that's for another day. Reducing carbon. I suppose you can do that in a number of ways. I suppose being efficient. Don't carry any passengers, like, you know, keep your barn rates down, keep culling them ewes. Breed from your ewe lambs, you know, you're not carrying an extra batch of stock all year, as some of the previous speakers were saying. You know, if I wasn't breeding my ewe lambs, I'd be out of an extra field with 60 hoggets in it, you know, like that. They're eating all year and they're not providing anything. Like, they maybe give you an extra bag of wool. Using performance recorded rams, you know, be efficient. Analyze your silage, feed accordingly. You know, if you've good silage, you need to feed less meal. Like, you could make a saving there. Soil fertility, my soil would be sampled all this year, and I've done it 5 years ago, so it's due again this year with the Northern Ireland programme. So it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And yeah, get a bit of clover into your sward, and get a bit of nitrogen from the atmosphere instead of you buying it. I suppose the summary is, what I want to try and do, I'll just probably maintain my stocking rate, give me a wee bit of wiggle room if the weather's bad. Mixed grazing is an option. Generally, I graze cattle in the dry ground and sheep in the wet ground, but, you know, if you have a good summer, dry summer, I have a bit of an overlap, so that does help with your worm burdens. Use your data to make your decisions to drive change. Be positive if you can, and you know, get on with the thing. You're in control of what happens within the farm gate. You haven't much influence outside it, so you know, every farm's different, and all you can do is do your best within what you have. You know, there's plenty of help out there from your advisors. Make use of them. Like, them boys are getting well paid, so make use of them. I think that's me.
Thank you, Mark. You seem to be doing a good job there. It's a big achievement to improve your gross margin. It's not just all the lamb prices there. I know lamb prices have risen, but it's a big change from 2019 to 2023 to do that, and it's a good achievement there.
Yeah.
So it is.
Work in progress.
Yeah, it definitely is. We have a few questions for you now, Mark. So I hope you have your thinking cap on here. The first question, Mark, what do you think has had the biggest impact on your improved gross margin?
Well, I suppose as a combination of lots of different factors. Lamb price is a big thing. I suppose now they have steadily increased this last few years, and it's good to see it. I suppose also I'm selling more lambs per ewe, which that's going to help as well. You know, the more lambs you can sell per ewe, your figures are going to increase. And just efficiencies, be efficient. Like, if you've anything carrying any stock, make sure they're working for you.
Yeah, very good. Question 2, Michael Landmark, what is the biggest impact on keeping replacement costs low?
You want to go first, Mark, or will I go first?
You go first, Michael. Give me a rest there.
I suppose you just on the benchmarking, it comes back to the number of replacements you require and the value you generate from your culls. So if the ewes are dying and you've got a high mortality rate, then you don't have that financial conversion to sell a cull and buy a replacement. So I'd say just the number and the amount of mortality that you have would be big factors from what I would see in the benchmarking.
Yeah, and keeping your own, keep your own yo lambs, like they're every bit as good as anything you'd buy, and they're used to your farm and they're able to thrive in your conditions. So I wouldn't be a bit afraid of keeping my own stock. They're costing you less. They're coming into you at cost price rather than going out to the mart and buying nice ones at twice, 1.5 times what you'd maybe achieve for your own ones you sold them. So,
Yeah. Yeah. The question to Eileen now, has CAFRE ever considered moving their lowland flock to a closed flock?
Yeah, it's actually a sort of a conversation that comes round in circles more often than you would think. We all know the benefits of a closed flock, Glenn, in relation to biosecurity, and I suppose even the benefits of being able to, select your own replacements from within. I suppose we're slightly unique in that we are selecting our replacements from our hill farm centre, so we have a really strong and we have a direct, impact on the selection criteria for those. But we have considered it, and it may be something that we'll look to. The simplified option that we have at the minute is that the fact that we're breeding our replacements away from, or outside the flock, is that we can finish it. Everything goes to slaughter. And I suppose, whenever we take into consideration that closed flock, then we have that split in relation to our own breeding stock and potentially a terminal sire. But no, it is a conversation that we have had on numerous occasions, as I said, just because we have the opportunity to select our lambs from our other hill flock.
I suppose in a point you nearly are a closed flock in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, we have a very, we know the health status of the animals that we're bringing in, and like I said, we have the control of the selection criteria. So as close as goes to a closed flock as you could be without necessarily breeding your own replacements within the flock.
Yeah. The next question I have for you, Aileen, again, is that what can be done to encourage ram breeders to performance record and to select for positive fat cover to produce the lambs that are more easily finished from a forage-based system? So there's a couple of questions in there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've highlighted, and across the board, we've seen the highlight. We know the importance of having genetically superior animals. And I suppose we just have to keep going on with that, and it's a chicken and egg scenario, isn't it? Some people will say, well, the rams aren't there, and other people will say, well, there's not the supply and demand for them. So I suppose all we can do is continue to highlight to people that understand the genetic potential of your rams, knowing the rams that are actually superior, knowing the animals that are going to work better within your system will pay dividends from a financial point of view and a sustainability point of view. If we look at it in a wee bit more detail into actually some of those EBVs that we actually select our lambs for, I mean, that one's quite an interesting one, because I suppose historically we've always thought, select negative for fat because there's potential, negative impact there. And I suppose maybe we have always really chased the weight of a lamb or not, and actually maybe negative weight cover on a ram actually lets us take those lambs to heavier weights without getting them over fat. And I suppose people have chased that weight along. Maybe what we need to think a wee bit more and even look at the financials around this, and especially in a poor year where grass is low, we have to put a lot of concentrate on those lambs to finish them, that actually there's negative consequences there. And actually the reality is, especially if you're on a grass-based system, not even extensive, even just a good grass-based system, that positive fat will actually have really positive impacts on your ability to finish those lambs off grass. And maybe finishing those lambs at a lighter weight, with no concentrate whatsoever, will be more financially viable. So it's maybe just a job that we have to do, and to highlight the benefits of actually selecting the lambs with positive fat cover and the benefits it has for finishing off grass.
Yeah. Funny enough, I watched the market last night for a minute or two, and a lamb's 25.5 kilos making 160 quid. But there's a lot of feeding in them lambs. And I was running on camera, so there's a lot of feeding in them, the way that the skins was on them. Yeah, and
our aim is to take all of our lambs if possible, but as many as our lambs through to finish with absolutely no, with very, very little concentrate whatsoever in them. And the majority of our lambs will go off the grass, and actually the really only concentrate input is in the ewe there. So that's where your slightly positive factor for fat will actually come into play.
Another question for Jacqueline here. What country provides the biggest competition in the lamb market going forward?
I think we probably all recognise that GB and Ireland provide our nearest competitors really for it. A lot of product going to GB and a lot of live exports through the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah, thank you, Jacqueline. I suppose question I have for Mark here, just for myself, is when you have put the investment into your ewe lambs by doing them for toxo and vaccinating them all, do you still not think it's worth keeping them ones on and run them over targets, or are you still content enough to sell them?
Yes, and it is something that pops up, and I've been thinking about that. You know, it does cost money giving them 2 vaccines, but at that time of year when you're scanning your ewe lambs are a good price, and it sort of takes the edge off it a bit. You know, there's a good chance, you know, if you had them ewe lambs that didn't get in lamb, when you had them at a certain weight, and they were mature enough, and they didn't hold in lamb, there's a good chance they mightn't have a lamb next year, are there?
Yeah.
You know, so it's a balancing act, but I would just cut my losses and get rid of them.
Yeah. Mark, another question here. With an improved lamb market, are you tempted up your sheep numbers?
You get the tempted this time of year, but in the springtime could be different. You had to lamb them, but yes, it's positive, and I think it is a positive outlook for maybe younger sheep farmers that are you know, getting started. Like there's a market there, and if all these other countries, the lamb supply's dropping off a wee bit, you know, there's a market. Like, if you can be efficient, you know, there's a market for your produce. Yeah.
And were you ever tempted to go to a more electronic recording system for your sheep?
I have a weighbridge now, which is going that road. I suppose most of the technology is there, but if I'm fit to keep up with, it might be a different thing. But yes, maybe if we get some of the young boys going on it, we're going to go down that road.
Yeah. See an answer back from Jacqueline here. She says that Australia is another one to watch, with the possibility of deals being done maybe into the UK. So we'll see. But I think their biggest problem out there maybe is water, which we have too much of. So maybe it mightn't be as big a thing as we might think, but time will tell. Eileen and Mark, is March lambing supplying lambs at the wrong time when prices are at the lowest?
I'll go, Mark. I'll give you a chance afterwards.
Yeah.
I suppose there's lots of things to take into consideration, and traditionally we would have said, you know, that obviously those we've seen a difference. If we go back and maybe look at, and Jackie will be in a good position, maybe feed into this here. You know, traditionally we would have seen those higher spring lamb prices, and obviously then, you know, maybe that bit of sort of a slug, you know, whenever we're getting that bulk lamb coming through, and then that higher price is coming back up again. I think the last few years we haven't that trend. There's not that the trend is bucked, but the lamb price has held up a bit, so that has helped it. But we also have to take into consideration, for me to meet those who, you know, slightly higher prices, you know, either lambing earlier, there's potential, you know, to have higher concentrate inputs into that. And really what I'm trying to achieve and what we're trying to demonstrate is March lambing sits, because then we're hitting that lambing season. We've taken the ewes through at grass for as long as possible, so there's very little concentrates entered into that ewe pre-lambing. She's lambing down and she's going out until the season whenever we're putting, you know, good spring grass in front of her. And Mark has already mentioned that, the nutritional value of spring grass. So I suppose the lamb prices might be potentially lower, but the cost of production of that lamb is lower, and it's weighing it up. It's definitely this input versus output. So you have to take everything into consideration, not just necessarily the price of the lamb. It's how much it costs to produce that lamb as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I suppose it's hard to know when the best time to lamb them. I suppose, you know, this year if you had lambs ready early, they were a fantastic price. Yeah, once you're lambing in March, the cheapest lambs you could put out on the farm. You know, you're lambing them, they're eating grass all summer. You're getting them away maybe July, August time with no concentrate on them. You know, they're not costing you much. I suppose if you're looking at lamb prices now, them late lambers would you know, if you're selling your stores now, like you're into crazy money, like. So then you have a warm burden with them we small lambs all summer, like. It's every farm's different.
Question to you, Mark. With a prolonged lambing period, is there increased chance of more disease around the lambing shade?
Well, I lamb a couple of batches really. So I would lamb the first batch and then have a break for about 7 to 10 days. So I'd try and power hose out my lambing pens and disinfect everything. Well, I suppose with my second batch, with my ewes and my ewe lambs, you could have a tendency in the past for disease to build up, but you just have to try and clean the pens out after every ewe and lime them well, and use my magic trick with the wipes and hope for the best now.
Yeah. A question to Michael here. From benchmarking, does lamb numbers have the biggest impact on gross margin?
Yeah, so I suppose when we're looking at these gross margins on a per ewe basis, the more lambs you can have in the ewes, lambed by the ewes, weaned by the ewes, and finished, the more output you're going to have, which is then going to spread out your costs. And if we're looking at where the resources go, we're talking about a lot of lambs being finished without meal, and most of the meal going into the ewes. So the more you can get out of those ewes and the more lambs that you can get out of them, the better. But you still have to manage your costs and so on associated with that. But we do see the lambs per ewe 1.82 in the top 25% and 1.35 in the bottom 25%, right, by gross margin. So it is pretty important.
Yeah, thank you. Eileen, can you see full confidence in fecal egg counts when a spike results in rapid losses?
Yeah. Okay. I suppose it's important to understand, I suppose, fecal egg counts and use them and understand their limitations. So a fecal egg count it's a tool, and it gives you an indication to the presence of adult worms in that animal. So I think we have to use them in correlation, as in it's a tool, it's an indication to worm burdens. It has to also be taken into consideration when you think of actually see if there's any clinical signs, and obviously if there's any weight loss. But just because you mentioned there that rapid spike, that's probably most likely, if it's a rapid spike that they're seeing, if they've got a low worm count and then a rapid spike, that's probably most likely nematovirus. And I suppose another thing to can take into consideration is all the other tools that we have to our disposal. So we have an understanding when it comes to nematovirus in relation to the risk periods and actually when those spikes might take place. So it's important, yes, they do have limitations, and we have to take all those factors into consideration. However, they still are a very, very useful tool, to give you an indication of the worm burdens. It's also really important as well that we have an impact on the result that you get back. And the result is only as good as, it's like anything, the results are only as good as the input you put in. So to get a really clear and closely correlated result from a fecal egg count, the sample has to be taken appropriately. You need a fresh sample. It needs to be sampled within 48 hours or less if possible. It also needs to be kept cool. I'm not recommending everybody go out and lift the dung samples and put them in the fridge. It might make you really unpopular, but it is important. Because if you have an older sample, or if you let a sample, sit for too long, the eggs can actually hatch and actually potentially get a lower count than what you would have seen if that sample had been done appropriately. And also, don't just lift one sample because it won't be representative of the whole flock. So there's a lot to take into consideration there. You have to ensure the sample is collected appropriately and it's analysed, within the appropriate time to get a very clear view, and take everything into consideration. The condition of the lambs, if there's weight loss, and maybe if it's a timing point of view. And if I got a low result for nematovirus, I would still, take that one as an example, that would still make me feel like I would say I still need to probably transfer that animal, because the worm burdens there with that particular parasite will spike really, really quickly. So it's a tool, a useful tool, but use it with everything else in relation to it.
And the other question I have for you, Michael, Eileen and Mark, is that do you dose your ewes immediately post-lambing?
We would try and adhere to the best practice in SCOPS, Glenn, and the reality with worms and not flicks. So I want to make that clear before I highlighted it, is that a strong, mature ewe in good condition has no need for a worm drench, because she actually has an ability, she's got an ability there to, cope with that level of worms. If you do have ewes that are in poor condition, and we know that if there is a point in time, especially when a ewe might need drenched, is that in around that lambing time. And if I did need to dose that adult ewe, I would try and do it where possible immediately after lambing, or maybe potentially immediately before and prior to going out to fresh grass if you're lambing indoors. Because the last thing you want to do is give that ewe a drench as she's getting off the chiller, and all that worm burden or parasite burden is then in your field.
Yeah, fair enough. What way do you do it, Mark?
Yeah, I suppose I've tried both approaches, and I suppose the jury's sort of out on it. If you've big, strong, fit ewe, she might ball right, but the problem is I would maybe think of is you're passing your worm burden onto your lambs then, so I would probably err on the side of just dosing them before turnout after the lamb, and thinking down the line you might have a cleaner pasture for your wee lambs.
Yeah. A question to Brian Hanthorne here. I think he's sitting there thinking he's going to get no questions asked to him, but Brian, are you seeing more sheep farmers doing more or less reseeding on their grass over this past few years?
Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, we're seeing a lot more reseeding within the BDG groups, especially. More really what Mark's coming out there, but getting this early spring grass where your reseeds, those swords are far more responsive to that early fertilizer going on. I suppose the other thing too, from a carbon point of view, we're relying more on clovers nowadays, and it's a great opportunity to get clover into the mix. I suppose within the BDGs, the farmers are a lot more fussy in the mixes they're putting in. They're really going down through every ingredient in that and looking at sort of more of the intermediate and late varieties as opposed to the early ones. So I hope that maybe answers the question.
Yeah. And more lime been used then, Brian, too?
Definitely, even with Mark's, maybe Mark didn't actually mention that Mark's put on a lot of lime over the years with all the soil analysis he's done. And again, that's key when you're reseeding, get the lime on according to what the analysis says that it needs. And again, that'll encourage the clover as well.
Yeah. One of our last questions here to Eileen and Mark. If your farm scans were showing a high percentage of triplets, would you ever consider of reducing this in any way?
My take on it, I suppose, we touched on this sort of debate about the scanning percentage. And scanning percentage is important, of course it is, but it's only important if you can convert that. So triplets tend to overinflate scanning percentage, and sometimes if you can't convert those lambs, then you end up maybe with a lower weaning percentage. So I mean, it's not something that we would advocate for a lot. I would much prefer to be sending the majority of those ewes out, lamb down with 2 and send her out with those 2 lambs, because then that triplet lamb is something you can manage. And lots of people will manage that ewe very well with the 3 lambs, but to me, 9 times out of 10 it ends up as a pet lamb, and that's another management. If it's something that you want to actively reduce in your flock, I suppose you have to think about why you potentially think you're getting more of triplets. Most of the times will be linked to obviously the breed of type that you're working. Is she quite a prolific ewe? So you maybe have to think a wee bit about your replacements. Are you continuously selecting? Mark had highlighted there he was working with a Belclair. If you're continuously working with those ewes which are known to be high prolific, as you have to think about that, because you might end up with more triplets. Also take into consideration the appropriate body condition score of the ewe. But ultimately we would always aim to not have too many triplets. They're useful for that additional single to foster up. But like I said, sometimes you overinflate your scanning percentage, and it's difficult to actually then take those lambs all through to weaning.
Yeah. If you're getting too many triplets, Mark, what do you do with them?
Give them away to somebody.
I think wouldn't be too many sheep farmers would argue with that question now. But
no, I wouldn't want too many now. 10 or 12% maybe.
Yeah.
Triplets would be more than enough for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. As Eileen said, 2 good lambs is what you want, But yes, if you're lambing early and you've triplets, you've no bother selling them. But
yeah,
it depends what time of year. If you're lambing in the middle of March and you've a pile of triplets, not too many want them.
No, definitely not. The one question I have for you is how do you see a way forward and getting our breeders to record their rams, and knowing as sheep farmers what kind of a ram, the history of that ram, what he can do for you and what he can improve in your flock. How do we encourage our breeders to do more of that?
I'm going to say hopefully maybe events like this, Glenn, helps, okay? Highlight, I think we all know this, and sheep farmers know this, okay? Lamb numbers, growth rates, reduced days to slaughter, they all improve the technical efficiency of your business. They improve the financially viability of your business. And what Michael has explained very clearly, and we're very aware of it nowadays, that helps reduce the environmental issues within your business and improve environmental sustainability. So I think we just have to keep, going with the message and try and highlight, and maybe it's pounds on paper and it's increasing these facts, that actually you need to have animals. The way I look at it is that you've got two options that's going to drive performance in your livestock system. You've got the genetic potential of your animal, and then you've got the nutrition and the health. And you can have a healthy animal with the best nutrition in front of it, but if it doesn't have the genetic capabilities to, do well in that system, then you're never going to be getting the best out of your system. So we really just need to continue and just plug on at highlighting the importance of actually improving the genetic potential of your flock, within the systems and within the parameters that you want to achieve. So yeah, just continue, and the likes of Mark, who's actually a real advocate for it, his message to highlight how important it is to understand, ensuring you've got, genetically superior animals, performance recorded rams, knowing what you need out of your flock. I mean, the fat one was actually a really good, important factor, that if you're on a grass-based system, select rams that are going to work better within your actual base system. If you're an early lamb and flock and you're putting lambs through concentrate, you can maybe take those lambs with lower, or a ram with lower fat, and take them to heavier carcass weights. But if you, number one, you need to know what you want out of your system, and use the tools as available. We need to have more tools available to us to help us push the system on. Yeah.
Well, the next day we go to the sheep task force, Eileen. We'll take you with us to make let the minister hear that, because it'll be, we're talking about them things and trying to move our sheep industry forward here, and with good performance on rams and growth rates. That's the only way I can see of getting forward and for to get the rams we need here, rather than just bugging out to buying rams because he looks at you well or stands well on his feet. It doesn't really matter because them things not count. But he needs to be doing the job.
We need a scheme in place where it encourages breeders to produce a 4 or a 5-star ram. The first year, if there's a scheme like that, the first year, the sales, any rams that are recorded, people will be given mad prices for them. The next year, everybody will have recorded rams.
Yeah. We need a scheme of some description, and as sheep farmers, we need some sort of incentive to buy them rams too. So we do. But here, that's for all the questions we have for you tonight. Thank you very much for all participating in this, and it takes a wee while there to throw your heart out there, especially to you there, Mark, to put your figures on the line there and show us what you're doing, and we're getting good help there to do that through our advisors from CAFRE, and helping farmers to improve what they have, and also from the LMC to give us an insight on where our sheep market's going and where we will get a good positive outlook for lambs in 2025. So hopefully all comes to fruition, that we can do all these things and get to where we want to be, to make a good, profitable enterprise out of sheep. And so thank you all for coming along. And once again, I can't say safe home because you're all at home, but just so I don't see you all, I hope you have a happy Christmas and a prosperous New Year. So thank you very much.